Hello friends, in this video let's understand what is Tailwind CSS. Tailwind CSS is a utility first framework. To understand what is utility based framework, let's quickly create a button. To create this button, we are not going to use Tailwind CSS, we are going to write our own CSS. So I have created a button here and I will give some text for the button. By default, this is the style of the button which we get from HTML. Now let's quickly style this button. For this button, initially I will use a property called all and insert all the default styles. So now if you see, all the default styles of the button is gone. Along with that, globally let's reset all the padding and also let's reset all the margin. Just to have a sans serif font globally, I'm adding a font family here. Now let's quickly style the button. So first I'm giving a class for this button. I'm giving it a name BTN. I'm calling that BTN. Let's add a background color. I'm giving a purple shade for that. Let's change the text color as well. So color colon, I'm giving a light purple color. Let's add some padding, 12 pixel for the top and bottom and 24 pixel for the left and right. Let's add some border radius. I would like to give 5 pixels. Also let's add cursor as pointer. Now our button is ready. Let's add some style for the hover. So dot button colon on hover. Let's make the background color a little lighter. Now our basic button is ready. Now let's see what is a utility based framework. Generally when we write CSS, we create a class and inside that class we write all the properties required for that particular class. But when it comes to utility based framework, each and every property goes into a separate class so that reusing becomes more easier. Let's now break down this class into multiple classes and see how a utility based framework will look like. So I'm going to remove this class button from here and let's create separate classes for each property. First let's create a background class. So I'm going to create a class called BG Purple 900. You may wonder why I'm giving a big name here. You will understand in some time. So what we can do, let's cut this particular property from there and paste it here. So now we have a separate class for our background. Now let's copy this class and add here so that we get our background here. Next, let's create a class for font color dot text purple 100. I'm going to move this property inside this. Next, let's create a class for padding px, let's say 24. I'm going to give a padding left as 24 pixel and a padding right as 24 pixel. Now let's create a vertical padding. So py 12 and let's add padding top as 12 pixel and padding bottom as 12 pixel. Now let's remove this padding from here. Next, let's create a class for border radius and give a class name called rounded medium and I'm going to move this particular property here. Next, let's remove this property from here and create a class for that cursor pointer. Let's add it here. Next, let's go up. Let's remove this class. Next, let's remove this button here to make things simple. Now we have separate class for each property. Only thing is that we don't have a property for our hover class. That's okay. In this, you may have a doubt. Here, if you see, we have two properties. One is padding left and another is padding right. But in the beginning, I told that utility based framework means each and every property goes into a separate class, but for convenience we can group similar properties as well into a class. But generally we will be having a padding left class and a padding right class separately as well. So now since we have all the classes ready, let's add all the classes to our button. We have the BG Purple 900 already there, so let's add all the other classes. So we have text purple 100, we have rounded medium, we have px 24, we have py 12, we have cursor pointer. So now when I save it, we get a similar button. This is how Tailwind CSS works. Now I will let you know why I have given this kind of a class name, because Tailwind CSS uses this kind of a pattern for its class name and I have given the same so that I can give you a proper demo. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the style completely from here and save so that we get the default button. Now let's include Tailwind CSS into our project. Let's go to Tailwind documentation and let's click get started. If you see, there are many ways in which we can include Tailwind CSS into our project. The easiest way is place CDN, but this is not the recommended approach. We can use this approach for development purpose, but even if we use for the development purpose, we will miss a lot of facilities that Tailwind offers. In some time, we will implement Tailwind using Tailwind CLI, but for now, I just come here and I just copy the script and I paste it on our head tag. Now let's see the output. If you see, we have a similar kind of button. The only thing is that the padding X and padding Y is completely different. We can just remove these two classes. Now we can give a smaller size class. I give padding X as 8 and padding Y as 3. Now let's save and see. See, we have similar type of button. Ultimately, Tailwind CSS comes with a bunch of classes in which each and every class will have one property or more than one similar type of properties inside. As I already said, using place CDN is not the best option. For example, you will miss autocomplete facility. Likewise, there are many facilities that you will miss. So let's implement Tailwind CSS in another way. Another simple way to implement Tailwind CSS is through Tailwind CLI. And if you go to framework guide, there is separate instructions for each and every framework. If you wanted to implement implement in any other framework. For example, in Angular, you can open Angular. There is step-by-step instructions. Just following these instructions will set up Tailwind CSS in Angular. Now let's go back. Let's implement with this another simple setup which is using Tailwind CLI. Here I'm keeping the Explorer open. Let's open a new terminal. Inside this, I'm going to run all the commands and instructions what it is given in the documentation. So let's run this first command. Since I am in Mac, I'm using a sudo command before that. If you are in Windows, you no need to add sudo. That will install all the required packages for Tailwind CSS. And after that, let's initiate Tailwind using this command. When I run this, a new file will get created, which is a configuration file for Tailwind. Now, since the basic setup is ready, I'm going to create a folder called source, inside which I'm going to create a CSS file. Let's name it as input.css. Let's create another folder as well called dist, and let's move our index.html into the dist folder. Since we have moved our index.html into dist folder, let's open Tailwind configuration and do some modifications to this content. If you see in the documentation, in the second step, you are supposed to update this particular content. So I'm just copying that. I'm replacing that content here. But the only thing what we need to change is instead of source, we have to change to dist, since we have our HTML file in dist. So what this does is we are telling Tailwind CSS that Tailwind CSS classes can be found in any HTML file or JavaScript file which is inside the folder dist. Now that we have finished the second step, let's go to the third step. Let's copy these 3 lines and then let's open our input.css and paste that 3 lines here. These 3 Tailwind directives, base, components and utilities, holds all the classes of Tailwind CSS. Next, let's copy this command and run that. Now if you see, a new file has been created called output.css. What actually happens is that Tailwind CSS compiles the basic styles and the class names which are required in our project, and it gets copied to the file called output.css. If you open this output.css, see, this is a normal CSS file. So let's close this. To explain about this command, we are executing a Tailwind CSS command in which we provide an input with -i and the path of the input file, and -o for output and path of the output file. Later, we add a watch flag so that whenever we add some classes to the HTML file, for example, if I add a class here, automatically it will rebuild and add the necessary classes to the output.css. Now let's remove this script from here and add our output.css to the index file. So let's add a link to CSS file, and in this href I give the name output. Let's close the server and let's run the server again. Now if you see, Tailwind CSS is working properly, and we have added a class called bgblack that is also visible here. Let's remove this and see this. Now that you understand how we implement Tailwind CSS, let's create an advanced button, and while creating the button, I will explain what is happening. So I create a button. Let's add a span tag, and inside that I'm giving add to cart. Let's add an icon for this button. I open Google's material icon and I search for cart. We have an image here, so let's click that and let's download the SVG file. I already have downloaded and kept here. Let's drag it and put it into our VS Code, and I'm going to just copy this code inside this and I'm going to paste it here. So if you see, this is the SVG code for add to cart icon. Now if I save, I have the cart icon here. Now let's style it. First thing, let's add a background color. In Tailwind CSS, background color starts with BG, and there are a lot of colors available. If you go to the documentation and scroll down, there's a page called color. These are the colors available in Tailwind CSS. In this, we are going to use this purple one. See, there are different shades from 50 to 950. In this, let's use 900 now. So BG hyphen, the color's name hyphen 900. See, since now we have implemented Tailwind CSS through Tailwind CLI, the autocomplete is working and we are able to see all the classes there. Let's give text color, text purple 200. Now let's give a padding X of 8 and padding Y of 3. Now let's move this icon to the left. I'm going to use flexbox. So let's add a class called flex. See, this is a class which has this particular property inside, and once we save it, we have this both thing to the right and left. Next, let's add a gap between these two. There is a class for that. Let's add gap 5. See, we have this much space there. Next, let's style this SVG a bit. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to add a class here. I'm going to give it a height 8 and a width 8. I'm going to remove this height and this width from here. These are height and width related classes available in Tailwind CSS. There are so many other height and width classes as well. For example, if you hover that, see, H8 represents height of 2 rem, that is 32 pixels. If you save this, see, the icon is little bigger now. Now if you see, the alignment is not proper, so we have to vertically align. So for flexbox, there is a class called item center which is used to vertically align the elements. So now if I save, see, both are aligned vertically. Generally for SVG, we give colors in two formats. One is with fill and another with stroke. For this particular icon, we need a fill. So let's add a fill equal to current color. If we give a fill current color, what SVG will do is it will take the font color of any parent element and apply as a background color for this particular SVG. It takes the font color, not the background color. So if you see, the font color is text purple 200, and thus we have a lighter color here. Let's add some more class. Let's add text as large. Large has these two properties inside, and let's change the font to semi bold. So for all the weight type of classes, you can type font hyphen and you get all the weight type of classes. I'm giving it semi bold. See, font weight is 600 for that. Let's give a rounded corner, so rounded medium, and now we have our basic button. Now let's add some hover classes. So in Tailwind CSS there are classes which starts with the name hover colon, which represents all the hover classes. After hover colon, whatever you give, it works only for the hover action. So let's change the background color now. I'm going to give a lighter background color, hover colon BG purple, and let's give 200. See, while hovering you get a different color. And let's change the font color now, hover colon text purple, and I give a darker color. So now if you hover, you get a darker font. And if you see, there is no smooth transition, so let's add smooth transition to it. To add smooth transition, there is a class called transition all, and let's give a duration. Only if we give duration, an animation will work. So let's give a duration of 500 and let's save. So any kind of transition happens with this 500 duration. See, we have a smooth transition now. Let's also add a active action. So active colon, let's give text purple 50, sorry, BG purple 50, which is little more lighter than BG purple 200. So if you see, while hovering you have this color, while on active you have this lighter color. Let's add a tricky feature now. What we are going to do is we are going to give a different color for this SVG and span while we hover. So what happens is, while hovering the parent element, we have to change something in the child element. So what we can do is, there is a class called group. Let's add the class group outside, and let's remove the hover text colors from here, and let's add that to this span. Instead of hover, we can give group hover. What happens now is, when a parent is hovered, and if the parent has a class called group, its inner child class with group hover colon and whatever class we have will get activated. So let's save it and check now. I'm hovering the parent, the text color changes, but the SVG color doesn't change because we have not given hover for that. Let's give hover for that as well. For a change, let's give a different color. Let's give text green 600, and if you see, while hovering we get a green color for the cart icon. Since we have a lot of classes, I will enable word wrap. Here if you see, there is no smooth transition for the text and the icon. We have smooth transition only for the background. So let's add this transition and duration to this inner SVG and also to this span. So now when we save this, see, we have a smoother transition for all the elements. Tailwind also provides features for breakpoints. For example, if you wanted to have a full width, let's have a full width, and since the button width is wider now, let's add a justify center. What justify center does is, if this particular element is a flex container, justify center justifies all the inner content to the center. If you see, it is horizontally center now. Next, let's cut this button and create a div outside and paste it inside. Let's add a class and give container. Now if you see, there is no changes there, but when you go to a larger screen, see, the width gets capped. So that is the use of container. And if you want to centralize the container, you can use MX auto. What it does is, it distributes the excess space which is there on the right to the right and left. Now since we have given a full width for the button, in the last screen as well we have full width. So what we can do is, for screens which is higher than medium, let's add a width auto. Now if I save, see, button is in the previous size for the larger screens, and for mobile screens you have a full width. As I told earlier, we use hover colon to activate the classes for hover action. Likewise, we can use breakpoints to activate a particular class for a particular breakpoint. So how it works is, by default we have to give a class, and for other screens we have to give a different class like this. Now we have seen some of the basic and some advanced classes in Tailwind CSS. Since now you have a good idea on how Tailwind CSS works, you can go to the Tailwind documentation, and from there you will be able to understand each and every concepts easily. For example, if you wanted to know about spacing, just open spacing, and if you scroll down, see, these are the default spacings. So how you will use that is, say for example, you wanted to use 4 with padding, then you use P-4. If you wanted to use padding for left and right, you use PX-4. If you wanted to have a margin for top and bottom, you use MY-4. Likewise, you can use all the spacing classes. I'll give you another example. Say for example, you wanted to learn about flex. Open flex. See, these are the classes available for flex, and you have detailed explanations for that. Likewise, the documentation is well structured, so you'll be able to understand everything just by looking at the examples itself. Along with that, Tailwind offers many advanced features as well. For example, you got dark mode. Even you can set up a complete theme according to the project or brand you work for. So this is in short what is Tailwind CSS. If you wanted me to cover any specific topic related to Tailwind CSS, kindly let me know. I can post videos on that. And if you find this video informative, show some love, and I will see you in the next video.